Do you remember Andy Griffiths? If you were any Aussie kid like me, or had no friends, you probably remember at least reading one of his books. And today, we're going to look at one of my favourite pieces of literature. I don't even know where to begin to describe these books, but one word that can perfectly describe these books is the obscurity of them. I mean, everything from the stories to the illustrations, and heck, look at even the front cover of the book is coded with creativity and obscurity. And even the blurb and some of the questions it was asking. Of course I ticked every box possible, I mean, why wouldn't I? Now that I look back, if I was a parent, maybe I wouldn't want my kid to read this type of book. But to the 9 and 10-year-old me, this was perhaps some of the funniest shit that I've ever read. The books were made by two men that perfectly personify what shitposting is. Andy Griffiths being the genius behind the stories, and Terry Denton behind all of his illustrations. Together, these guys create the perfect yin and yang combo of children's books. The thing that I really appreciated about these books is how they legit did not give a flying fuck, and really let their creativity flow through these books. How a pair of grown men are still reliving their childhood again. Of course, the media didn't really like that, which even resulted in some specific books, like the bad books, being banned in some libraries. But you'd think with absurd books like these that these books wouldn't be successful, but in fact it was the exact opposite. By 2015, Andy Griffiths had sold over 10 million copies in just Australia alone. And what was more surprising was that the parents, teachers and schools even approved of this. But what made these books so enjoyable to read? Well, for me, what made these stories so enjoyable to read was just how joyful and stupid the ideas were. Everything from the stories, illustrations, all points to one core theme that every Griffiths book points to. Don't take everything so seriously. I think it's very apparent that each book is literally screaming at you that this is clearly a joke. Andy and Terry did what no other children's book did, where they freely expressed their childlike sense of humor and creativity through interesting choices. Back when children's books were strictly locked in the confinements of colourful and playful drawings, with short stories where characters live happily ever after. In a typical children's book, you want it to be short, colourful and happy, like a lion that goes up a perfect hill. But Andy's books were wee-wah! It's the boldness of these ideas that really made it stand out from the crowd. I mean, if you were a children's author, would you really want to publish a book about how koalas come from outer space and rip people's faces off as a children's book? No. Heck, any of Andy's books makes Dr. Seuss look like fucking child play. And this is the same man that wrote The Grinch and Cat in the Hat. If I were to put children's books in like some kind of order, it'll be Rainbow Fish and Caterpillar books or whatever at the front, and then Dr. Seuss, and then all of Griffin's books at the end. Part of the reason why I gravitated so much to these books was just how it didn't tell the typical story of any children's book. Every time my teacher would read some book like Rainbow Fish or something, I just wasn't as interested as other kids. And I'm not discrediting that those are bad books. It's just that I found stories about kids waging war against their own bums so much more appealing to me. And the adventures of Andy and his friends in a gigantic treehouse was stories and characters that I felt more empathy towards. It allowed kids to be as creative and imaginative as possible, even if the ideas were absurd or stupid. I don't think there's just enough appreciation for the illustrations by Terry Denton. They're drawn in a way to look bad but iconic at the same time. It was a style of drawing that was made to appeal to younger audiences, which made it one of the most memorable pieces of art that I've seen. But the one true thing that I appreciated about Terry was that how his drawings would be on the side in all of Andy's books, and it would be like an Easter egg hidden throughout all the pages of his books, and how you flip through and the guy's head explodes and stuff. It was just like a whole nother story hidden in these books. Well, I think that's what made these books so successful and enjoyable to read. I can't even fathom just how much blood, sweat and tears went into making these books. Revisiting these books made me experience a whole dose of nostalgia, of the kid that once spent his entire afternoon reading about bums, pranks and treehouses. These days, Terry and Andy still publish successful novels like their Treehouse series, which I remember getting this book every day for my birthday up to the 52-story Treehouse. As time went on with anything, I found playing video games or way more fun, or whatever I did back then. It wasn't that these books weren't enjoyable to read. In fact, even as an 18-year-old, I still find these books hilarious. It's just that I grew up. I probably won't be reading the 130-story Treehouse or watch the TV adaptations of these books, but I'll always remember the fun times I had reading these books. So thank you, Andy Griffiths and Terry Denton. for making my reading experience as a kid more enjoyable, and for really taking children's books to a whole nother level, and making kids around the world appreciate reading just a little bit more. Bog out.
It's summertime when the weather is hot. The sun is shining and it sure hits the spot. It's summertime and we're all feeling lazy. Year of the quarantine, we're all going crazy.